Throughout the first half of the book of Acts, his name is frequently tied to Paul's. And in fact, he's depicted as being the sort of senior partner between the two of them. But about halfway through Acts, the two of them have a sharp disagreement and decide to go their separate ways. It is the last we see of Barnabas, as the rest of Acts follows Paul's journeys. Paul occupies a more prominent place in the formation of the early church, as witnessed by the fact that his letters make up a substantial portion of the New Testament. But the story of Barnabas is an important part of our story. Today, we'll see what we can make of this often forgotten disciple. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas. And this is your daily devotional for Thursday, May 22nd, 2025. We first meet Barnabas early in the book of Acts. He was apparently a Hellenistic Jew from the island of Cyprus, and a man who commanded respect early on. Here's the first instance of his appearance on our radar screen. He's lifted up as a positive example of the way the early church shared their possessions. We read, "Now the whole group of those who believed were of one heart and soul, and no one claimed private ownership of any possessions, but everything they owned was held in common. With great power, the apostles gave their testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was upon them all. There was not a needy person among them, for as many as owned lands or houses sold them, and brought the proceeds of what was sold. They laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as any had need. There was a Levite, a native of Cyprus, Joseph, to whom the apostles gave the name Barnabas, which means son of encouragement. He sold a field that belonged to him and then brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet." We actually learn a surprising amount about Barnabas from this brief glimpse. As a Levite, he was heir to a tradition of temple service, subordinate to the priests. They functioned sort of like non-clergy church staff in a variety of roles, from musicians to doorkeepers. Traditionally, the tribe of Levi was a landless tribe, deriving their support from temple offerings. The fact that Barnabas was a Levite from the island of Cyprus tells us that his family were part of the Jewish diaspora who came back to Jerusalem for high holy days, like the Feast of Shavuot or Pentecost. That could explain why he was apparently in Jerusalem for this story. But wait, Levites were supposed to be a landless tribe. How did Barnabas own land that he could sell and donate the proceeds to the apostles? The answer is probably that as a Levite living outside Palestine, he and his family had probably gone into business and accumulated some wealth. In any event, his gift made enough of an impression that Luke, the writer of Acts, mentions him by name. Over the next several chapters of Acts, Barnabas is a major figure, arguably the most important figure. He's the one who introduces a newly converted Saul to the apostles in Jerusalem. He and Paul, still at that time called Saul, traveled together doing the work of evangelism. Interestingly, whenever they are named together, it is always Barnabas and Saul. Barnabas' name first, then Saul. But this changes abruptly in Acts 13. Saul suddenly becomes known as Paul, and when they are mentioned together, now it's Paul and Barnabas. It's hard to know what this is about, but whatever the cause, Barnabas now begins to recede from view, and Paul overtakes him as the main character of the narrative. The last we see of Barnabas in the book of Acts, he and Paul have a falling out and go their separate ways. Luke writes, "After some days, Paul said to Barnabas, 'Come, let us return and visit the believers in every city where we proclaim the word of the Lord and see how they are doing.' Barnabas wanted to take with them John, called Mark, but Paul decided not to take with them one who had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not accompanied them in the work. The disagreement became so sharp that they parted company. Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus." And that's it. Except for a few mentions by Paul in 3 of his letters, that's the last we see or hear of Barnabas, literally sailing off into the sunset. So what about Barnabas should interest us? Well, a couple of things. First, he was an early Jewish convert to the church and was apparently a well-respected voice in the church. He was committed enough to give away at least a portion of his wealth to the church and its ministry, and he then devoted his life to spreading the good news far outside of Judea. One could be excused for thinking Paul was the real reason for the growth of the church, but Paul himself would acknowledge that he was just one among many. We should remember Barnabas as an example of what true commitment looks like: generous, focused, encouraging. We could do worse than follow his example. Tomorrow, the story of Cornelius. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.